Nintendo is a company that I have an interesting relationship with. On the one hand, I was a mega fan back in my teenage years, where I thought they were simply the best company on the earth that could do no harm. Many of their video games are still some of my favorite classics of all time, and I would be doing a disservice to admit that I still don't enjoy their experiences from time to time. But on the other hand, Nintendo's general disdain for their own fan base, that paired with their increasingly anti-consumer practices, has left a bad taste in my mouth, and I'm definitely not the hardcore fan that I used to be back in the day. But this video is to talk about all the various controversies Nintendo has had since the Switch era. No, this video is actually meant for me to gush about the game designers that work at Nintendo and the masterful game franchises they've crafted over time. I'm simply going to talk about and rank what I believe are the top 10 Nintendo franchises of all time. You already know the usual, you're free to disagree with me in the comments section, and this is all in my opinion, blah blah blah. I don't want to waste any more time, so let's just get into it. Starting off, we have an interesting pick, and that is Yokai Watch, a once massively popular series, able to rival the popularity of Pokemon at one point in its life. It now lies barren in the niche wastelands that all Nintendo franchises are inevitably destined to die at. All dramatic narrativizing aside, I think Yokai Watch is pretty underrated when it comes to Nintendo franchise. Granted, all the ones on this list I also feel are pretty underrated, but that's just subjective, so I won't hold you there. But this series feels like, in my opinion, it surpasses Pokemon in its initial concept as a monster collectathon adventure game. For one, the models used in this game are way more expressive and colorful than the horrible desaturated mess we got in X and Y. Seriously, if you're gonna transition to 3D, at least make the designs translate as well. Jeez. On top of that, Yokai Watch also has an engaging plot with characters that interact with the world and aren't just acting like NPCs for half the time. Nah, every character feels distinct and alive in this vibrant, saturated world, and no two yokai are the same in personality or in gameplay. Speaking of gameplay, it takes a unique approach where you don't actually control the yokai yourself, but instead they attack automatically and you give them supplements in battle to help them perform better. And this meshes with the central theme of yokai being a force for both good and evil, and how humans have to interact and live with them through their own means, and how this is established even further in the second game. Oh man, it's just an underrated franchise, man. I am extremely disheartened that it didn't perform as well in America, leading it to be discontinued and being basically a Japan-only game franchise at this point. But if you somehow miraculously get your hands on a copy of Yokai Watch, I would highly recommend you play through it. The concept is just so novel and unique, and the developers do interesting things with it. All of the yokai designs are weird and wacky, while still managing to be cute and badass at times, and the narrative in these games are surprisingly deep and entertaining, with the writers taking good care to work in the Japanese mythology seamlessly into the story. It's just a really underrated franchise. Alrighty then. Now Kid Icarus is an interesting IP, because when I say it's one of my favorites, I'm usually only talking about the one game on 3DS, Kid Icarus Uprising. But man, what a gigantic feat this small little game has for such a niche franchise. Masahiro Sakurai just woke up one day and said, sure, I'll revive an entire series that hasn't been seen since the 90s, and made one of the best 3DS games, one of the best video games ever created. It is astounding just how amazing and gorgeous Kid Icarus Uprising is. The music is beautifully orchestrated, with a hard rock and ethereal feeling throughout the entire OST. The narrative is endlessly gripping, with each and every plotline having you on the edge of your seat. The characters are all charismatic and entertaining in their own right, with the dialogue being some of the funniest writing I've seen in a Nintendo game. Seriously, I'm quite surprised with the stuff that this game is allowed to get away with.
Fit for you.
Yeah, I've been using them for a long time.
They're well suited for ranged attacks, and they split into blades for close combat. They're very well-rounded weapons.
Oh, I know. I used them in the last brawl.
Brawl? How horrible! Were you hurt?
No way, it was a smash!
I just can't imagine you in a melee.
That's because I wasn't.
They were quite ballsy when it came to this game, and the most important aspect, the gameplay. Kid Icarus Uprising has some of the best intersection of gameplay and narrative that I have ever seen. It's simple really. You start off with the weapon that you have to play through the entire level, and each level is divided into chapters which you select from the home screen. Easy enough. but that would do a disservice to just the amount of variety in weapons, the amazing bestiary, and just impeccable level design that you can find throughout your entire journey. It's not a stretch to say that each chapter of this game feels like its own cinematic experience, with boss fights and story moments that will stay in the back of your head for years to come. And the voice acting! Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's just way too much to praise about this game. I definitely plan on making a video in the future to sing its praises, and it's insane how one game can end up on my top 10 list for the best Nintendo franchises of all time. It's just that damn good. Now, I know what you may be thinking, Plexiteer, how dare you put one of the most iconic video game franchises this low on the list? Listen, alright, you're lucky it's this high. But in all seriousness, Mario is an interesting franchise with me. On the one hand, he has incredible masterpiece games that I can come to at any time and go in for an enjoyable experience. On the other hand, I've only played 2 of those masterpiece games and have not actually played Odyssey yet. Yeah. So far, my experience with Mario games has been the new Super Mario franchise, which I've played a lot of, the 2 Galaxy games, and Mario 3D World, which I played with my siblings, which is way too underrated by the way, just actually one of the best Wii U games. So while I can confidently say that, yeah, Super Mario is probably one of the best Nintendo franchises out there, me personally, I haven't played through many of his experiences. I wasn't there for Mario 64 or Mario Sunshine, and I haven't played Mario Odyssey yet because I haven't played the Switch much that often, to be honest. And as for the other Mario series like Paper Mario, Mario and Luigi, Mario Kart, Mario Party, I don't consider those part of the Super Mario brand, because if I did that I would have to also consider Yoshi and Donkey Kong as part of that, and that just seems pretty disingenuous to me. So when I am talking about Mario, I do mean the actual platformers, 3D or 2D. But other than that, there's not really much more to say. Everyone watching this video knows who Mario is. Mario Galaxy is probably one of the greatest 3D platforming games ever made, and revitalized the Super Mario brand after a quite controversial Super Mario Sunshine. But overall, I just feel like Mario is a solid series, not really stand out, it's iconic for a reason, and everyone knows it has good games. Not much more to say on that. He also has way more consistent game quality than Sonic. Alrighty then, up next we have the F-Zero franchise, and I've just gotta say, as a kid, you guys might have had your Mario Karts, maybe even your Sonic Team Racing for some of the younger fans, hell, maybe even Outrun for some of the older audience, but for me, the classic racing game that I always played as a kid was F-Zero. I remember I was surrounded by a lot of racing games as a kid, from Need for Speed to NASCAR to this niche game you've never heard of called Speed Zone, but the game that always stood out to me the most was F-Zero. Something about its fast-paced nature and the pure spectacle of it all just brought me in as a kid. Being able to go over 1,000 miles per hour on these intergalactic tracks where one mistake can mess up the entire race for you was just purely exhilarating. And the music to accompany each track was just blood-pumping ecstasy. And all of this, mind you, are just on the GBA F-Zero games. I didn't get to play the true magnum opus of this series until I got a little bit older, and that was F-Zero GX. One of my favorite racing games of all time. This game just takes all of the principles of F-Zero and turns them up to 11. Long courses that continually test your skill, with difficulty spikes that will send you crying into the theater as you lose every single race. 30 contendants, each with unique vehicles that are stunningly modeled and have enough personality to fill up an entire game on their own. A truly jaw-dropping story that, while now may seem kind of cartoony and childish, to me as a kid seemed completely epic and made me want to play the game even more, despite its challenging nature. F-Zero just has it all. Fast races, cool cars, sick character designs, and absolutely stellar music. And even though the difficulty nowadays might be a turnoff to most people, I just feel like it makes me want to play the game even more and slowly master the skills over time to become the true F-Zero World Champion. It's just pure exhilarating fun, and I highly recommend to anybody looking for a real racing game challenge to get on F-Zero GX. Now to some of y'all, this series might come to a complete shocker to you, because I barely talk about it on this channel. Well, good luck to any fans of the series, because I have a 2-part video retrospective where I go into detail on every Rhythm Heaven game and talk about why they're so amazing. To put it shortly, I feel like Rhythm Heaven is just the perfect rhythm game series through and through. First of all, the games are relatively inexpensive, except for Mega Mix, and they're not much of a time sink to play like other games on this list. Second of all, they're perfectly child-friendly while still respecting the player's intelligence. They get difficult as they progress, but not too much for any casual players to enjoy. They're just perfect as cozy little games and experiences that you can engage with at your own leisure. And finally, the music in these games are absolutely stellar. Not the best Nintendo has to offer, but definitely underrated in my opinion. I feel myself humming along to the beat of the songs well after I've got done playing through each minigame. And might I add, this game series has some amazing minigames that are way above the quality you would normally see for a party style type of game. With the Wii one in particular, Rhythm Heaven Fever absolutely peaking with its minigame design and every course feeling original and fun to engage with. Now I played through every single Rhythm Heaven game because there's only 4 of them, and all of them offer a unique experience that you can't find in any other rhythm game. Rhythm Heaven Game Boy for having its novelty and experimentation, Rhythm Heaven DS for its more engaging and thoughtful musical design, Rhythm Heaven Fever for its all-around wackiness and best art design, and Mega Mix for combining all of them into a, while I'd say inferior, ultimately satisfying conclusion to the series, since I know Nintendo's probably never bringing it back. So sad too, because I feel like Rhythm Heaven is one of those game series that you really can't replicate anywhere else. It takes creating a whole genre just to mimic the feel and vibes of this game series, and I feel like something important has been missed, as Rhythm Heaven unfortunately goes into the dredges of the dead Nintendo franchises. Ah yes, we now get into the top 5 Nintendo series of all time. For number 5, I have the Earthbound series, or Mother if that's what y'all prefer. To me, the Mother series represents a time in gaming where I started to stop looking at video games as just a form of entertainment and more like forms of art that can actually be engaged with on a higher level. Up until this point, I mainly viewed video games through the lens of how older people or adults saw them as, nothing but distractions for kids in order to get them to behave well. It was a cheap industry, made to simply ride off of the whims of little kids' short attention spans, but the Mother series made me start to realize just how impactful and meaningful to a person's life a game can have, and no game exemplifies this change more than in Mother 3. This was the first video game I actually cried at towards the end of the story because of how emotional and good it was. Unlike movies or TV shows, I had actually been playing the experience the entire time. It was me who was controlling Lucas going through all of those places. It was me who had to witness his growth into a strong, confident hero from the timid, scared child he used to be. And the emotional music and artwork that accompanies it all is simply bliss to enjoy. I know I haven't mentioned this before, but I actually didn't like Earthbound, the game before Mother 3, that much because of the arcadey design of its gameplay and just how aimless the game felt in general. I didn't get the wacky dialogue the characters had. I didn't get the eccentric environmental design and overall aesthetic of being a kid in the 90s using magical ESP powers. And I for certain didn't get the wacky gameplay with these crazy enemy designs and weird combat abilities. No, it was only until Mother 3 that truly opened my eyes to how beautiful this game franchise truly was, and how immersive, deep, and spectacular a video game could actually be. And this franchise is in part the reason why Undertale is one of my favorite indie games of all time. It's no surprise that Toby Fox took huge inspiration from these games when making this game, and as you can tell from some of the older videos on my channel, I'm a huge fan. But I don't want to dwell on this franchise for too long, as I definitely don't want to spoil Mother 3. If you haven't played it, go play it. But also, I might give Earthbound another chance in the future, as I never truly completed the game. I know pretty much all of the story stuff and all of the general theories, but I should do my due diligence to experience the game firsthand and take in all of its magical glory. So yeah, that's all I have to say. The Mother series is very special, and it's a tragedy that it didn't sell well in the West. It had the potential to be Nintendo's greatest franchise if games were continued to be developed for it. Now, Pokemon is an interesting series in my opinion. One, because at a time in my life, it genuinely was my favorite Nintendo franchise of all time. I was just imagining all sorts of crazy, wacky ideas that this series could take, and all of the hidden potential that lied within it, from Mega Evolutions to Z-Moves to the insane anime I watched every single episode of. But as I got older and thought about it for a second, I'm more obsessed with the idea of Pokemon than its actual execution in reality. As the Switch era came to pass, I just got hit with a wave of realization at how stagnant and just boring the series has gotten up until this point. Everything just seemed so by the numbers by the time I got to Pokemon Sun and Moon. And the endless controversies of Pokemon Sword and Shield completely turned me off to the series for a while, and I haven't recovered since. But on to the reasons as to why I actually like Pokemon as a franchise, one of the main reasons is just the sense of exploration and freedom that each game gave you. Despite these games' low fidelity in the production department, I feel like each Pokemon game was special essentially because it made the kid who was playing it feel like they could do anything they wanted with zero consequences. The Pokemon world felt like a utopia, where the worst things that could happen in it is an evil team trying to make the oceans grow larger. And while in retrospect that actually is pretty horrifying to think about, it was endlessly comforting to any person that wanted to escape the more harsher aspects of our reality. And creating that immersive world was the best thing Pokemon used to do when it was still innovating and expanding upon its ideas. Now, the initial concept of Pokemon is flawless in my eyes. The battle system is probably the best RPG battle system I've ever played. All of the Pokemon designs, while not complete bangers, have something interesting about them that distinguishes them from your typical cartoony monster design, except for some of the newer designs which just seem lazy. But overall, this franchise has an insanely strong foundation to build upon, with practically limitless potential. It just so happens that that potential is continuously squandered by a company that seems more obsessed with the monetary value that Pokemon has to offer, rather than the intrinsic one it does. And to be honest, could you really blame Game Freak? In our capitalist world, finding a goldmine like the Pokemon IP and not just resting on your laurels would be extremely rare to see, I'm not gonna lie. And plus, not everything has been completely ruined, of course, as when the main developers refuse to innovate, the fans often pick up the slack and create truly impeccable art. On to the top 3, and man, these 3 gaming franchises have some of my favorite games of all time made within them. And with a franchise name like Legend of Zelda, you're already setting yourself up to just make banger after banger. Seriously, the creators behind each and every one of these games are oozing with such passion and love for the craft that you can feel it with every ounce of gameplay. Personally speaking, Legend of Zelda The Wind Waker is probably my top 5 favorite video game of all time. As you can kind of see from this channel's artwork and some of the videos, I adore Toon Link and his entire persona in the series. But that's just the thing about Legend of Zelda. Almost every one of the games can be somebody else's personal favorite game of all time. Ocarina of Time for practically revolutionizing the action-adventure genre and setting the standard for how all 3D action games should look and feel as time goes on. Or how about Majora's Mask for its truly revolutionary time travel mechanic that makes the NPCs in the game feel like actual living, breathing human beings that have their own goals, wants, and dreams that you only have a certain time limit to fulfill, making the player's agency tenfold as they have to strategize by what they value most in the game's brilliant narrative. Twilight Princess for its far more dark take on the Zelda mythos and engrossing narrative that feels the most cinematic out of any other Legend of Zelda game to date. Its dungeons and gameplay fully mastered as everything feels so seamless and natural to play through. Or a game that practically reinvented the entire open world genre, Breath of the Wild, still one of Nintendo's best-selling games of all time, and by far the most popular Legend of Zelda game. Being able to fully realize the core concept that Miyamoto and Aonuma had for the original game series, all the way back in 1986. Every single one of these masterful titles, in of their own right, has something unique to offer to a player and is probably responsible for millions of people worldwide's first gaming experience, in which they fell in love with gaming as a whole. And this is not even to talk about all of the side games, the spin-offs that are also of good quality, the extensive lore, the fantastic music, and just so much more to love in this grand series called The Legend of Zelda. It honestly astonishes me how Nintendo as a company can come up with so many unique IPs that take their brand name in a different and unique direction while still keeping the quality and child friendliness that they're most known for. And these top 3 picks are just a testament to the amount of range that this company can output when all of their brilliant minds come together and decide to create something truly special. Now, this probably would be the most controversial pick on this list, as Kirby is a franchise that honestly doesn't seem like anything special on first playthrough. But to be honest, this is purely just nostalgia talking. The Kirby franchise was actually the very first game I have ever played in my entire life, with that game being Kirby and the Magic Mirror on the Game Boy Advance. Ever since then, I have fell in love with pretty much every one of this Pink Puffball's experiences through and through. With Kirby Return to Dreamland especially making it into my top 10 games of all time, simply because of how it refined Kirby's core gameplay mechanics to a T and provided just endless fun to play through. Kirby is just another one of those franchises that has such an endearing and limitless concept. Its approach to game design, its philosophy to power-ups, and its overall aesthetic is just the biggest inspiration to me as a game designer. I love the lore of this franchise, how it seems dark and intricate if you just decide to dig a little bit deeper. I love the music of this series, contrasting its bright, bubbly atmosphere with hard rock and orchestral themes that will send you in a haze of ecstasy as you jam along. I love this game series' characters, how it manages to create such compelling and interesting characters that barely speak or have a narrative within each game on their own. Everything about Kirby as a franchise just screams comfort to me. It's a game for all ages that's simple to pick up and really hard to put down. It introduces its mechanics in a compelling way. It never feels too hand-holdy, while also creating a discernible challenge for those looking for it. It has some narrative depth in its story, but not too much where you'd have to actually sit down and play it for hours on end. To me, Kirby as a franchise just represents the perfect idea for a platformer. Great music, great visuals, great gameplay, and a lot of heart. That is why it is my second favorite Nintendo franchise of all time. But what is number 1, you may ask? Before I rush on to number 1, let me just mention some honorable mentions. Splatoon, even though I've only played the first game on Wii U, was actually the first shooter I've ever played since I was kinda not allowed to play those as a kid. And can I just say, the way that Nintendo managed to effortlessly take the pretty violent and graphic genre of the first-person shooter and convert it into their iconic kid-friendly brand was just masterfully done. Instead of fighting each other, you simply fight for territory using paintballs and goo guns. The weapon system was pretty extensive, fun, and well balanced from what I played. The online was stable, albeit it took a while to get into every match. And the music was once again pretty stellar, as it creates a whole new genre and style for itself, reminiscent of Hideki Naganuma in some aspects. Mario Kart, a series I've mentioned earlier in this video, while it might have not made the top 10, is quickly notable as it has by far the highest selling game on Nintendo Switch, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, but it's also just a charming party franchise that anyone can pick up and play, while also allowing enough depth for more serious players to get enjoyment out of. Once again, the music is great, and its recent release on Nintendo Switch with there being 96 courses provides the series a magnum opus that is deserving of all the praise and admiration it gets from fans worldwide. And lastly, Star Fox is an honorable mention, mostly because I feel like Star Fox is the most mistreated Nintendo IP they have by far. The amount of ways they've mistreated this IP is simply egregious. But the core series itself has some standout bangers, with Star Fox 64 and Assault by far being the highlights of the entire franchise. For their intense sporadic gameplay cycle, their memorable but not as iconic music, and hilariously entertaining characters that I just can't get enough of. You all saw this coming. It was pretty obvious. I mean, I kind of feel like this is cheating to say this is my favorite IP. But of course, Super Smash Bros. Is my favorite Nintendo franchise of all time. Really, does this even need that much explaining? It's the Marvel Cinematic Universe of gaming. Take all of those amazing IPs, those amazing worlds, all of those experiences, and combine them into a single identity, a single experience that makes up the sum of its parts. A game that revolutionized the fighting game genre as we know it, creating an approachable but endlessly engaging experience for players of all walks of life. A game that inspires hype and nostalgia to all who hear its name worldwide. A game that takes all of these beloved IPs and brings out the best of their aspects into one singular game. That is Super Smash Bros. That is a game I always looked up to as a game I wanted to make when I grew up. And every Smash game offers its own unique take on this idea. 64 for establishing the brand and getting its whole playground aesthetic off the ground. Melee for expanding upon its core ideas, but we all know how it's remembered nowadays. Ultimate for refining the game to a T, but also for creating one of the biggest fighting cast rosters in history. And Smash 4 introduced good online play, let's just say that. But the game that I feel embodies the ideas of Super Smash Bros. As a concept is of course Super Smash Bros. Brawl. And that is for the simple fact that it has Subspace Emissary. If Super Smash Bros. Is the Avengers of gaming, then Subspace Emissary is the endgame of the MCU. Nintendo was like, no, it's not enough to just have all of these amazing characters all in one place to create an unforgettable experience, but we also have to create a gripping narrative which justifies all of their involvement while also creating gripping character moments for all the people and fans of these IPs that are loved so dearly. That, backed to an unforgettable OST that brings out the best of every series' potential and heightens up their music to 10, and you can see why Super Smash Bros. Is my favorite gaming franchise of all time, besides Sonic. Thank you everyone for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this little video of mine. Of course, I was guaranteed to miss some pretty notable series that I know people might have loved, but this was more of a personal video. Tell me anything with the series that I might have missed, as well as what your favorite Nintendo series are, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.